Hi, I'm Jim Smith. This is the 1000. One of the difficult things about doing this series is we shoot them a long ways in advance. So this shoot is being done in July. It's my second shoot in July. And July is kind of an interesting month for a political junkie because on July the 1st we have Canada Day, or it's more properly called Dominion Day. And the United States on the 4th has Independence Day. And it's worthwhile to contemplate on the issues of democracy, freedom, and personal responsibility when those days happen. I'm not sure most people just barbecue and drink and watch the fireworks, but it is a time for some serious thought. The United States of America was the first revolution to form a democracy that happened any place in the world. There have been a number of revolutions since then. There's some argument over what constitutes a revolution, what's a coup d'etat, but I would argue that there's no argument that the French Revolution was indeed what it was. Garibaldi in Italy was more of an amalgamation. Definitely Germany was an amalgamation under the Prussians. The Russian Revolution, of course, which went through the stages of the liberal democratic Kerenskys to the Bolsheviks from Lenin, and then Stalin was turned into a murderous dictatorship that ever walked the face of the earth. These are typical progressions from the revolutionary item. If we talk about France, we'll go with France because it comes right after the United States. You would think there couldn't be two revolutions so different. But the mob rule, which is basically what happened in France, led to the massacre of large numbers of people that other people didn't like, rich people, aristocrats. Some people that probably deserved exactly what they caught, and probably a lot of people that didn't. The guillotine is a very equal opportunity killer in those things. But we look at that. We look at the French. They go through the terror. They go through the empire. They go through a number of republics. I don't even know how many republics we are at with France now. What is it, about 5, something like that? They've had a heck of a time getting a democracy established at all. Russia hasn't made it yet. They're probably not much better off than would have been if they had stayed with the Tsars. I don't think Tsar Putin is that bad a title for the man. That seems to be where they're going. Mao Zedong, China's slowly coming out of that particular effort, but what started as a noble cause ended up being very murderous and the cause of the death of many, many, many Chinese. Pol Pot, even Cuba. Cuba is kind of a special interest of mine because when Castro and Guevara were still just starting that revolution, there was a write-up in one of the gun magazines that had actually gone out into the jungles and into the hills and had met with Castro and some of his troops and had written up on the guns of the revolution. And it was really interesting because at that point the American public, I would argue, were quite in favor of Castro and Guevara and what they were doing, because Batista, the dictator, was a military dictator and was not a particularly appealing human being. And nobody really cared if he got thrown over. But again, sooner rather than later, we get into authoritarian, totalitarian rule. We get political dissidents thrown in a slammer. Due process vanishes, and we're with another dictatorship. So my question to you is, so why does that happen every place but America? Because there's only one difference between America. The Americans did one thing different than any other revolution did. They put the first 10 amendments of their Constitution together. And amendment's a terrible word. I wish they had used some other word than amendment, because that makes you think they're doing changes. They're not. Those are the Bill of Rights of the American citizen, 1 through 10. And the second one, as you well know, is the right to have private firearms. And I know there's all sorts of weasels and arguments over the punctuation, stuff like that. But let's look at it as it's been practiced. It doesn't matter what it actually means at this point. It's been practiced for a long time, over 200 years, and the Americans have got a pretty good gut feeling, whether Mr. Obama likes it or not, about the ownership of firearms. And they have not fallen into a dictatorship. They have not had a terror. They have not had dictators in the streets or anything like that. And that's what they were afraid of. If you read John Adams, if you read the founders of the American republic, you know, they were terrified about that. So they were not, in the real sense of the word, totally democratic people. Thomas Paine was, but the rest of them weren't. They were trying to balance between mob rule and allowing people to govern themselves. Now, one of the great books on American history, and sadly it's dropped out of circulation, is Alexis de Tocqueville's Democracy in America. And I remember once sitting down talking to an American professor about that book, and he was somewhat humiliated. He had to come to Canada to find somebody that actually read the book, not the abridged version, but the real thing. De Tocqueville's in the 1830s, and he is fascinated by the democratic nature of the United States, which still exists to this day, where they elect dog catchers and everything else. I was at a Republican Party planning session in the U.S. once a few years ago, and I was amazed as they analyzed all these different elected offices and how the Democrats had some of them and the Republicans had some of them, and how the Republicans were doing very well in the low level but were somehow missing out in the higher level positions, and what that meant. It was very, very different for a Canadian to understand that. But Canada was formed at a different time. When we talk 1867, the United States has just gone through the American Civil War. And the American Civil War was devastating to the people of Canada, because the greatest democracy, the first democracy, the only one that worked, was tearing itself apart over sectarian issues. And when you understand Canada, you understand that Canadians are totally different people because of that impact upon us. Yes, there were Fenian raids and this or that, but the real bottom line was we were appalled by the U.S. Civil War more than anything else. We didn't really want to be Americans. We had made that point pretty clear. The United Empire Loyalists, where my family comes from, the War of 1812, the settlement of the West, we have pretty well decided the way we do things is a little different, and we want to keep it that way. And how that affects us as gun owners and as political activists is this is the last refuge of the scoundrel. When you corner a liberal and you're a gun banner and you're giving them better than you're getting, they always say, but we don't want to be like the United States where they can buy a gun in every corner. Well, that's censored. That's horse bull. That's I don't know. I can't even find words that are printable to say in this thing. But it's just plain ass wrong. The Americans got gun control bills up and laws and regulations and up the yin yang. They're heavily regulated. In fact, in some ways, they're much more regulated than we are, because an American citizen come to Canada and buy firearms. A Canadian citizen going to the United States has a substantial difficulty doing that same thing. There's a big difference here. I can mail order firearms all across Canada. Canada's a big country. Some of the dealers are thousands of miles apart. I can do that. You can't do that in the States. So some things are same, some things are different. But to throw the anti-American canard up is really something that is the last resort of these people. We are different people. We share almost a national holiday, but in many ways we're different. We have our own belief, and to say that the only difference that keeps Canadians from becoming Americans is American gun ownership is so blatantly wrong. I don't know a sociologist, an anthropologist, a historian of Canadian culture, history, or anything else that thinks that Canadians are not substantially different in every possible way than Americans are. So don't assume that that guns somehow determine what makes an American American, and some gun law makes Canadians somehow different. This is not the way it works. So next year when we have Canada Day or Dominion Day or Independence Day, think about the similarities and the differences. And remember one thing, America never went through a terror. If you want to go online, go to your friendly local Wikipedia and look up the French Revolution, or buy a book on it. I'll tell you what, there's a couple good books on the French Revolution. Maybe we'll mention a couple of them in our bibliography that'll make your hair stand on. And those were really, really nasty times. Then when you go look at what the Americans did, you'll see a huge difference. And they were first. They did it right, and nobody else was willing to listen to how they did it. Go look up Alexis de Tocqueville. Look up Democracy in America. I presume it's on public domain now. It's only about 1,000 pages long. It's a nice light read. No, it isn't really. But it is a read for those of you that are really seriously interested in this. Because if you don't understand America, you don't understand why Canadians are different. So that's my kind of little message on this for this trip. So thanks for dropping by, and we'll talk to you again. Thanks for dropping in and watching. If you liked what you saw, please share it with your friends. Please like it. Please subscribe to our channel and drop into www.the1000.ca and follow our movement. Bye.